Welcome to the course Using Data to Provide Personalized Student Support. My name is Abelardo Pardo, and together with Leah McFadden, we coordinate this course. The purpose of this video is to give you a quick introduction of the material we're going to cover over the next 3 weeks. The first question we should ask ourselves is why? Why do we need to explore this space? And these are the 4 objectives we have in mind for you to achieve during the course. The first one is, by the end of this course, you should be able to describe in detail how learning analytics can truly support the deployment of a learning experience. The second objective is to be able to interpret the data collected in a learning experience. There is a wide variety of tools that collect data, but the main problem is we need to interpret this data. We need to connect it with a learning experience. And most of the material you'll see on these 3 weeks is about this connection. The following objective is a bit more precise. We would like you to be able to examine these data sets and produce what we call insights. This stage sometimes is also known as the sense-making stage. And this is one of the big challenges we face in the learning analytics space. There is a significant gap between data sets and insights. And this gap needs a fairly sophisticated process and elements and stakeholders to contribute to the production of these insights. And finally, creating the insights is not enough. We need to make sure that these insights have an effect. They are translated into actions in the learning environment. In our experience, one vehicle that has been very successful to crystallize this action is the provision of what we call feedback. And what we've seen in the past is the use of data sets allows us to produce these feedback actions that is highly personalized. Now, based on our experience, what we're going to offer you in the next 3 weeks is the possibility of exploring these elements. And in the last week, we'll offer you a tool that will help you establish that connection, build these personalized feedback actions based on the insights that are derived from the data sets. Now, in order for you to navigate these 3 weeks, we propose to you the following scenario. We want you to imagine that you are a member of a team in an educational institution, and that team is commissioned to provide the following 4 deliverables. Deliverable number 1, your team is supposed to identify which data sources are available at your institution. That means get a sense of the tools that are being used and the data that is being captured by each one of these tools. The second deliverable is to identify these connections between the data sources and the learning design. So suppose you have several courses in your institution, and suppose that you have previously identified the data sources. It is very important for you to start becoming familiar with these connections and try to identify which data sources are most relevant in order to introduce what we call actions or changes in the learning design. The third deliverable is how would you best support instructors and their decision-making process using the data and the insights that have been previously collected. Data and insights. And finally, the fourth item that you are requested is how would you better promote the use of data for the improvement of learning designs, learning environment, or learning experience. Now, in order for you to work in this environment, we suggest a scenario that is a specific learning design. Now, the purpose for us to give you this is because it simplifies the discussions. We can reflect or refer to the elements of this scenario, but at the same time, you are free to take this scenario and shape it or change it in the way you see fit. What we are assuming is that you are observing a course over the period of 6 weeks. Week number 1 here, nothing happened. This is basically getting to know the students. From weeks 2 to week 5, the students are given the same pattern of resources and activities, which is basically 2 videos and 2 sets of questions connected to each of the videos. And this happens for weeks 2, 3, 4, and 5. And we collect quite a lot of events about these interactions. On week 6, there is a midterm examination. And again, remember, this is a synthetic scenario, therefore you can adjust it or change it to your liking. We are assuming that this midterm has 10 questions, and these 10 questions are grouped in pairs of questions, 1 per topic, for a total of 5 topics. So another way to take a look at it is suppose that you have covered in your course 5 topics in these 4 weeks, and then there is a summative assessment, a midterm exam with 10 questions, and each of the 5 topics you covered gets 2 questions in that exam. During this period, during these 6 weeks, students are able to interact through a discussion forum that is available to them. Now, in this synthetic environment, we'll provide you the data set capture during this enactment. And this data set is comprised of 4 files. The first file contains information about the students. This pretends to simulate the type of administrative information you would collect, like the enrollment type, name, last name, and some other additional attributes. The result of the midterm exam is provided to you in this file, midtermresults.csv. The observations on how the students participate in the forum are contained in this file, forumparticipation.csv, which, by the way, you can open with a spreadsheet program like Excel, for example. And all the data that we captured during these 4 weeks and the interaction with videos and questions is captured in this file called blendedparticipation.csv. The reason for us to give you this artificial scenario is to bring you as concrete as possible set of elements that will allow us to frame the discussion over the next 3 weeks, but at the same time leave some space for you to experience or to extrapolate what we are observing here and take it to your own personal scenario. Now, one of the challenges that we faced when we were conceiving this course is what kind of audience are we going to have? And this was a very tricky decision, and after thinking carefully about it, we assumed that we would have 3 types of people joining this course. The first one is what we call the highly technical. And these are people that are proficient with programming languages. They know how to write programs and scripts, but they are not very fully aware of the requirements for data analysis and not fully aware or experts on the context of educational design. The second profile we consider was those that are experienced in data analysis. So these would be people that are very proficient using a statistical package, but they might not be fully fluent with programming issues and not fully fluent either in pedagogical context. And the third profile we assume is educational designers. Educational designers are experts in pedagogy. They know about the elements that make sense in a course, and they are not very familiar with the statistical analysis angle and not very fluent with programming. So as you can see, 3 different profiles. Now, rather than designing the course for one of these 3 profiles, what we decided is to divide the course in 3 streams, and each one of these streams will have activities that are more relevant for these 3 profiles. So what you need to do before you start the course is think about yourself, which one of these profiles is more likely for you to be useful, and then follow the 3 weeks of activities for each one of the profiles. Of course, you are free to move between them, and all the material is available, but we are asking you to select one of these streams and follow it. Now, what is going to happen over the course of 3 weeks is that we're going to look at 3 layers of elements in the learning analytics space. In week number 1, we're going to talk about logs. Logs is basically information that the machines capture while you are interacting with them in the internet. So if you have your laptop here, you are interacting with an app and you are capturing what we call millions of logs. We're going to be exploring what is the relevant part of these logs that we should consider from the point of view of technology, statistical analysis, and learning design. In week number 2, we're going to leave the logs behind and focus more on statistical analysis. And we're going to start drawing the connection between first the previous elements, the logs, and these analysis. And we're going to start talking about how do we produce models, how these models are used for prediction, and how these models connect with the learning design. Everything we're going to discuss in these 3 weeks will be connected to the learning design, the learning environment, and the learning experience. And finally, on week number 3, we're going to bring everything together and start to frame actions and start to define actions. How do we use the models and predictions that were obtained in the previous stage, or how we can derive connections between the logs and personalize actions that will eventually be deployed in the learning design, in the learning environment, or in the learning experience. And for this last stage, we're going to use a specific tool called OnTask that has been defined precisely to deploy personalized actions to students. So this is an attempt to bring these 2 visions together. So remember, you have 3 profiles or 3 levels of expertise or 3 areas of expertise, and this is what is going to happen as time goes by. As you can see, the highly technical will focus on programming, on automating a set of scripts to talk to a statistical package, and then to manipulate a programming API. The data science stream will first deal in week 1 with data sources and identifying collection of events that are captured as logs. In the second one, it will be focused on the creation of the predictive model. And in the third week, in the actions, we'll explore the connection between these models and what would be used in a real learning experience, these actions. And the educational design space, in the first week, we'll be talking about the data sources and establishing connections with elements in the learning design, and then also see the relationship between tool, events, and what would be ideal to obtain. The second one will establish a connection between the models and what is useful in the design. We will talk about potential uses for things like linear regression or classification. And in the final week, in the educational design stream, we'll identify specific location and specific actions to include in the design. Now remember, what we're asking you is to follow one of these streams. Of course, you can always move laterally and you can choose, let's say, for example, this for week 1, this for week 2, and this for week 3. However, you should be aware that these activities depend on each other. And therefore, it is very likely that as soon as you choose one stream, you should follow it and stick to it. At the end of each week, we'll ask you to submit, for those of you asking for the certificate, we'll ask you to submit one deliverable. And this deliverable will change from stream to stream, but it'll always be one. So at the end of the 3-week course, you'll end up submitting 3 items for evaluation, and these 3 items will change depending on which of the streams you select. Finally, before we start week number 3, we'll have one common activity for all of you, which is to get acquainted with this OnTask tool. You will have an account to log in, and this OnTask tool will be used for these 3 different streams. I think that's it. We're going to leave it here. We are very excited and looking forward to interacting with you. Remember that all the interaction and questions should be submitted through the discussion forum, and we'll have the instructors and the course coordinators ready to address any questions you might post in there.